Why we need sleep. In this video, you'll learn why getting enough sleep is crucial for health and wellness and longevity. You'll learn how sleep supports your immune system defense, is a form of mental health therapy, and will improve your physical and cognitive performance. In this video, you'll learn about the process of sleep and the various repair and rejuvenative activities occurring when you sleep, and you will learn of the short-term and long-term negative effects occurring when you do not get enough sleep. In this video, you'll also learn some self-care sleep hygiene tips you can implement now. So are we in the midst of a sleep epidemic? I would say we are. The data shows that we are. Listed on the left are several 2021 sleep statistics that have been posted on the Sleep Advisor website. And on the right is some data from some recent studies looking at the sleep issues amongst the military. So lack of sleep, it costs the U.S. $411 billion annually. This is due to additional medical costs that occur due to diseases and illnesses that arise because of undiagnosed and untreated sleep disorders. It's also caused from work time accidents, traffic accidents, and other issues occurring because of sleep deprivation. In the U.S., there's a 35% of adults do not get enough sleep. 5% of the nation is obese due to lack of sleep, and you will learn later on how sleep impacts obesity. 37% of people report falling asleep at work. 30% of the U.S. adult population suffer from insomnia. 10 million people in the U.S. remain undiagnosed for obstructive sleep apnea, and 9 million Americans take sleep aids. And recent studies have shown that multiple COVID-19 mortalities were linked to untreated sleep disorders because of the diseases and illnesses that develop under sleep deprivation. So looking at some of the military issues, some of the recent studies that have came out, 85.1% of the military had clinically relevant sleep disorders. 51% had obstructive sleep apnea, 24.7% suffered from insomnia. Over 41% reported sleeping less than 5 hours each night. In an interesting study that looked at veteran suicides, when they looked at 423 veteran suicides, they found that 45% of those who had committed suicide had sleep-related disorders. Additionally, they found that in the military, as you're exposed to mild traumatic brain injuries from blasts and just minor head injuries, 5 to 8 years down the road, the development of insomnia begins. And also one thing we're seeing, not only issues among the military, but in the civilian population, is that providers are just failing to actively screen for sleep-related disorders when they're seeing patients. And so many continue to live with these sleep disorders unknown to themselves. And also, the reason why this costs so much money and why there's so many different issues with mortalities and medical issues is that undiagnosed and untreated sleep-related disorders lead to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, mental illnesses, stroke, and increase in work time accidents. So how does the body regulate sleep? Sleep, energy, production, and recovery are regulated through the circadian rhythm, influenced by light patterns, cellular processes, and hormone development. The circadian rhythm is your biological clock that regulates sleep, digestion, and other processes occurring within the body. The image on the top right depicts the multiple variables occurring that influence sleep and energy regulation. These are adenosine, light exposure, and melatonin production. At the top is adenosine levels. Pay close attention to this, as later I'll explain how caffeine impacts adenosine and has an adverse effects on your sleep and your daytime alertness. Adenosine is a cellular byproduct of energy production. If you remember basic biology in high school, you learned that energy is produced when the food we eat, specifically glucose and oxygen, is converted into adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, then pushed into energy into all of our cells. The byproduct of ATP is adenosine. Adenosine is what makes you feel tired. It's a natural cellular process that causes the body to feel tired, so it may reset after it's been working for some time. Throughout the day, as you can see on this image, the body burns energy and the adenosine levels begin to build up. Then at night, the levels decrease as the adenosine loads burn off, causing you to feel tired. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, if you look at the image down on the bottom, is located in an area called the hypothalamus, and it regulates the circadian rhythm. Your circadian rhythm is regulated by the Earth's clock, synchronized with light and dark patterns. When darkness stimulates the eyes, molecules are released from the suprachiasmatic nucleus, triggering the pineal gland to begin melatonin production. The pineal gland takes the amino acid tryptophan, which is, we can only obtain tryptophan through consuming it. It converts tryptophan from 5-HTP to serotonin, which is then further synthesized down to melatonin, which is then released into the bloodstream. This is what causes you to fall asleep. Melatonin begins its production 1 to 2 hours before bedtime. This period is called DILMO, or dim light melatonin onset. Any light exposure during DILMO will prevent the production of melatonin, making it more difficult to fall asleep during your scheduled bedtime. This is why it is critical to avoid light 1 to 2 hours before bedtime. Caffeine, simple carbs, trans fats, and sugars have all been known to impact the pineal gland, reducing the amount of melatonin that is produced. Research has also found that blue light, which has the strongest level of photons, can rapidly turn off melatonin production due to the high sensitivity that the receptors in the eyes have to blue light. This is why it's important to avoid screens from TVs, computers, and mobile devices before and during sleep. Now, looking back at that top picture when I was talking about caffeine and adenosine. So how does caffeine create daytime fatigue? Some say they can drink caffeine close to bedtime and still fall asleep. Caffeine may not impact some's quantity of sleep, but it could impact their quality. But the greatest impact caffeine has is on the fatigue felt the next day. You see, caffeine blocks adenosine. Adenosine needs to burn off at night when you're sleeping, but when caffeine is still in your system, adenosine cannot burn off its load. Let's say you drink a caffeinated drink in the evening and the caffeine remains in your system throughout the night. Once the caffeine has finally left your system early in the morning, the adenosine is now free to burn off its excess load. Remember, adenosine makes you feel tired, so when you wake up, and now adenosine is burning off when it should have already burned off at night, you wake up feeling tired, simply because you drank caffeine too close to bedtime. Let's talk about the process of sleep. So during sleep, we cycle through 4 stages. Quality sleep and efficient sleep requires that we cycle through each stage 4 to 6 times, and it typically takes 90 to 120 minutes to go through one cycle and get through all 4 stages. These stages are closely regulated, occurring in a specific order with particular functions occurring during each stage. So if you look at the histogram over to the right, you'll see how it lists stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then REM. And you can see as you go through those stages several times throughout the entire night. And this histogram demonstrates how you pass through each stage, depicting an 8-hour sleep night. So let's talk about what happens during each stage. So the first stage is non-REM stage 1. This typically lasts anywhere from 1 to 7 minutes per cycle. It only takes up about 5% of total time spent in this sleep. It's a transitional stage from wake to sleep. During this stage, your breathing becomes shallow, blood pressure begins to drop, your muscles will start to twitch. And then you transition into non-REM stage 2. This is anywhere from 10 to 60 minutes per cycle. You end up spending a total of 50% total time spent in this stage, and you end up spending the most time in this stage. What happens during this stage is the heart rate and body temperature decrease. Breathing becomes shallow, blood pressure drops, digestion activity reduces and almost comes offline, brain activity decreases, and your muscles relax and constrict. Key activities during this stage, it's when it strengthens the immune system. It repairs damaged tissues and repairs the digestive system. What happens in the first cycle of sleep, this can last anywhere from about 15 to 20 minutes, and it gets progressively longer throughout the night to where you're spending about 50 to 60 minutes in non-REM 2, the last stage you have towards the end of the night. The next stage is non-REM stage 3, also known as deep sleep or slow wave sleep. It's called slow wave sleep because if you were to analyze and look closely at the brain, the frequency of the brain waves are moving extremely slow during this time. You spend about 20% total time spent in this stage. During this time, the heart rate and breathing slows even more. The brain activity greatly decreases. The body pretty much goes offline. This is when your brain and your muscles and bones build and repair, and the brain is cleansed and brain cells are replenished. This is when growth hormones are released. And as we age, we spend less time in deep sleep. And as you go through the cycles each night, the amount of time in deep sleep slowly decreases as you pass through each cycle. The next stage is REM, rapid eye movement. You spend anywhere from 10 to 50 minutes per cycle in this stage. About 25% total time spent in this stage. This is when brain activity greatly increases. The eyes begin to move a lot. The heart rate increases, breathing increases. And during this time, the body becomes paralyzed. It's called atonia. This is where a portion of the brain called the pons becomes inactive, allowing no movement of the muscles except for the ocular, the eye muscles, and the diaphragmatic muscles so you can breathe. During this time, some of the key things that happen is dreaming. The vivid dreams occur, and that is why you become paralyzed, because it prevents you from acting out your dreams. This is also when memory storage occurs. During the day, the brain, an area of the brain called the hippocampus and the amygdala, which is responsible for emotions, they begin to work together and replay the day's events and determine what they are going to store as long-term memory. This is also a time for a natural mental health therapy occurs. It's when the brain tries to really just record those happy, positive memories to improve your mental health. And it also, during this time, is cardiovascular therapy. When the cardiovascular system, as the heart rate increases and the blood is being pumped, it's conducting a natural cardiovascular therapy, cleansing out some of the toxins out of the blood. So if you look up to the histogram of the top right, you can see how as you pass through each stage and each cycle several times, the amount of time decreases and increases in certain stages. If you look at my chart at the bottom right, you can see, look at the non-REM stage 2. As you make your way through the first cycle down to the fourth cycle, you can see non-REM begins to get longer each time. You look up to deep, and you can see deep sleep slowly decreases over time, and then REM increases over time as we pass through each stage. So how many hours a night should we sleep? According to the National Sleep Foundation in a 2015 study, listed here on the slide is how long you should sleep depending on your age. So for adults, we need to sleep 7 to 9 hours a night. You notice by age, for newborns, infants, and toddlers, they need to sleep a lot longer. And that is because during the early years, they are still growing. And as I said, during the deep sleep stage is when growth hormones are released. They need to spend more time in the deep sleep stage in order to properly grow. And as we get older as well, as I mentioned that we spend a lot less time in deep sleep as we age, it's because the body has stopped growing and is not required to spend as much time within the deep sleep stage. So the Handbook of Clinical Neurology, 2011 edition, explains that 1/3 of our life should be spent sleeping. So if you spend 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, you will have spent 1/3 of your life asleep. So imagine if you lived to the age of 100, you should have spent about 30 years sleeping. And you may think that's a lot of time, but as you see everything that happens in the body while we're sleeping, you can see why we need to spend this amount of time asleep. And this is why you need those 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night. Looking at cognitive performance, during non-REM stage 3, during deep sleep, a system called the glymphatic system, that I like to call the brain janitor, cleanses out a hazardous protein called beta amyloid. So what happens during the day through a cellular process as your brain is metabolizing and processing the nutrients you eat, the leftover byproduct is called beta amyloid. When beta amyloid remains in your brain and you wake up the next day, you have cognitive issues, you have headaches. And they have also found that under 6 hours of sleep or less, you develop enough of that beta amyloid burden to develop Alzheimer's and dementia. The other thing sleep does is metabolic control. Sleep is a natural weight management. They found under sleep deprivation, it increases a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin is the hormone that makes you feel hungry. And it decreases a hormone called leptin, which is the hormone that makes you feel full. So under sleep deprivation, you are going to feel hungrier and you're going to overeat more than you should. Immune system defense. So while you sleep, the immune system restocks the cells required to effectively fight off diseases. They found that those who had more severe reactions to COVID were sleep deprived because the immune system was not strong enough to fight off the virus. Also, when you're sleeping, it's a natural anti-inflammatory therapy to help the body recover from existing diseases and illnesses. Next, the digestive system. Specifically during non-REM stage 2, the digestive system shuts down. And that is why it's key, and we'll talk about later, of when to stop consuming your meals. Also, while you sleep, there's a different type of acid released into the digestive system that specifically targets the bacteria in the gut that causes the development of gastrointestinal diseases. This is why sleep deprivation increases your likelihood for gastrointestinal cancers and other diseases. Cardiovascular health. So sleep provides a natural cardiovascular therapy preventing high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, stroke, and obesity. Also, sleep deprivation has been found to increase glucose, fatty acids, and cortisol, which impacts your cardiovascular health. Next is muscular performance. Muscular repair occurs in the deep sleep stage. So you do not grow muscles when you're in the gym and the fibers are tearing. That growth occurs during deep sleep. During deep sleep is when growth hormones are released to help repair the muscles. So to increase muscular performance, getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night is essential. It is also during sleep a natural anti-inflammatory is released to help promote this muscle growth. So sleep is also a natural form of mental health therapy. So what happens when we sleep, as I had mentioned, that the amygdala and the hippocampus work together to replay the day's activities that occurred and store long-term memories. When you are under sleep deprivation or you have disrupted sleep, there is a higher increase in the release of the stress hormone cortisol. And when cortisol is being released, the amygdala is going to be more active, and there's a higher chance of negative emotions being stored as long-term memories in the brain. And so this is why achieving good quality 7 to 8 hours of sleep is a positive benefit for mental health. And sleep deprivation also increases the immune system inflammatory cells called cytokines. And this creates more inflammation because when you're not getting enough sleep and your sleep is disrupted, there is a stress response and it increases this inflammation throughout the body. So nutrition and sleep. Let's talk about first some of the sleep disruptive dietary habits of what to avoid to achieve quality sleep. So consuming too close to bedtime will impact sleep. They say try to prevent eating food 3 to 4 hours before bedtime. This is because you need your food to be properly digested by the time you're asleep, so the body can go in and begin to repair the digestive system, and it can't do that when there's food in there. Caffeine. Avoid caffeine 6 hours before bedtime. I already talked about how caffeine blocks adenosine and is going to cause you to be tired the next day. Caffeine also can impact the pineal gland, preventing the development of melatonin. Caffeine is a stimulant, and it will also promote the release of cortisol, which also impacts melatonin development and makes it easier to awaken as cortisol is being released. Alcohol. You notice there are a lot of bullet points here because alcohol has a huge impact on sleep. You need to avoid alcohol 4 hours before bedtime. It impacts sleep worse the second half of sleep due to what is called metabolic rebound. That means by the time the second half of sleep occurs is when alcohol is really broken down in the small intestine and has the greatest impact on the body. For some, it may increase sleep quantity. They may feel like they can fall asleep fast and stay asleep, but it greatly impacts sleep quality. It greatly impacts the deep sleep stage. And as it impacts the deep sleep stage, you have less growth hormone being released, and that degrades muscular performance and muscular repair. Alcohol is a relaxant. It relaxes the esophageal muscles in the throat, causing acid to reflux while you're sleeping. Alcohol also inflames the cerebral spinal fluid used in the glymphatic system, your brain janitor that's used to cleanse the beta amyloid from the brain at night. It also is potentially lethal with those who have obstructive sleep apnea, because obstructive sleep apnea gets worse the second half of the night, and alcohol is a relaxant and puts you to sleep and makes it more difficult for you to awaken when your airway has become obstructed because of sleep apnea. which causes a greater decrease in oxygen to the brain. Alcohol also suppresses the release of GABA and glutamate, reducing emotional regulation and neural communication. Those are the neurotransmitters that help information pass between the brain cells, which is critical as the brain is repairing itself at night. Alcohol also reduces REM sleep paralysis. We talked about the paralysis that occurs during REM. Alcohol will prevent that, and so when you are having those vivid, violent nightmares, you are more liable to act out and harm a bed partner, because of the effects of alcohol on the paralysis. So nicotine. You should avoid nicotine 2 hours before bedtime. Nicotine causes difficulty falling asleep. It increases nighttime awakenings. Nicotine withdrawal can increase insomnia. Nicotine specifically disrupts the quality of REM sleep. And if you're smoking, it causes additional sleep-related respiratory issues. So what are some sleep-promoting dietary habits? So the foods and supplements mentioned here are the type of foods that will reduce what we call oxidative stress and inflammation throughout the body. And they also influence neurotransmitters, kind of grease the skids to allow the hormones to more easily move throughout your body, influencing sleep. So some of the foods that promote sleep are almonds, cashews, pistachios, walnuts, lean meats, fatty fish, dark leafy greens, avocados, carrots, bananas, cherries, mangoes, pineapple, oranges, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, soybeans, and plenty of water and staying hydrated. Hydration specifically helps deep sleep as well. You want to have 1/2 to 1 ounce of water per pound of body weight. And some of the supplements, all these supplements here, if you take them 30 minutes before bed, they have been proven to promote sleep, minus vitamin D. I'll talk about when you need to consume that. So you got GABA, melatonin, L-theanine, L-tyrosine. These all help. But vitamin D, you can achieve that by exposing yourself to enough sun. We get vitamin D from sun exposure. However, they found that consuming vitamin D3 too close to bedtime has impacted melatonin development. So that's one key thing you need to look at when consuming it. So here's a plan you can implement for self-care. First, I want to talk about self-screening for obstructive sleep apnea and for insomnia and other related sleep disorders. So the number one obstructive sleep apnea self-screening tool is called the Stop Bang. Stop Bang stands for snoring, tired, observed breathing issues, blood pressure, BMI, age, neck size, and gender. When you take this, it'll give you a score, and if your score is above 3, there's a high chance you have obstructive sleep apnea. The higher the score, the higher chance you have obstructive sleep apnea. If you take this and you do score above 3, I recommend you see your medical provider to be screened for sleep apnea. Two others are the Epworth Sleepiness Scale and the Insomnia Severity Index. These mainly look at your level of fatigue throughout the day and your perception of your quality of sleep and your level of insomnia. You can Google these and you can find them online. Now, self-care plan. Here are a few tips you can apply now. First, to synchronize your circadian rhythm. You want to go to bed and wake up the exact same time. Work with your body and have your body help you fall asleep. And to do this, you need to make sure you're going to bed and waking up at the same time every day. Eat all your meals at the same time every day. Remember, the circadian rhythm also regulates digestion, and it synchronizes with your awake and sleep patterns. So when you're eating at the meals at the same time every day, it helps synchronize your circadian rhythm for sleep. Avoid caffeine 6 to 8 hours before bed. Eat your last meal 3 to 4 hours before bed. And prepare to wind down 2 hours before bed. In this prepare to wind down time, that's when you want to finish all the activities that you do not want to be doing an hour before bed. So you want to finish any screen time and any activities requiring extensive light. You want to finish any activities that may cause any level of worry on the mind so that you are not worried about them when you lay down to go to sleep, because that worry will make it hard to go to sleep. 1 hour before bed is when you want to wind down. You want to have ceased all screen time, TVs, computers, and phones, minimal light exposure and sounds. So when you want to turn down all lights in the house and have just enough light to be able to do your final activities. And you want to relax. Apply relaxation, breathing, yoga, read a book, something like that. Also, when you conduct the same activity every night prior to going to bed, This actually can train the mind and has been shown to influence the release of melatonin, because then the mind associates this activity with bedtime, and you'll find that doing the same activity, like taking the dog out or loading the dishwasher or whatever it is, doing that same activity every night can trigger the brain to release melatonin. And then when you wake up, to help synchronize your circadian rhythm, you want to expose your eyes to as much natural or artificial light as possible. Turn all the lights on in the house, stand outside, face the sun. You want to get as much light as possible and maintain that light throughout the day. Also, when you are tired, there's effective uses of napping. And to understand napping, it's key to understand what you learned about sleep stages. So you want to either take a nap no less than 20 minutes, or if it's longer, make it at least 90 minutes. Because once you get past the 20-minute period, you start entering into the deep stage or the REM stage. And if you are awakened during the deeper REM, you'll find yourself disoriented and feel even more tired, and the nap will not be as effective. So keep your naps at a minimum of 20 minutes, or if you're going longer, to get a full sleep cycle in, go for 90 minutes. The next is exercise and sleep. Exercise has been shown to increase deep sleep. Studies have demonstrated that exercising 2 to 3 hours prior to bed can decrease deep sleep. So if you're exercising too close to bed, that will impact your sleep and also cause an increase of nighttime awakenings. So you really want to try to avoid working out anytime after about 2 o'clock is what the study has shown. But you do want to exercise in the morning or prior to noon, because this will help your sleep. Daily stress management and emotional regulation. So maintain an active parasympathetic nervous system. So if you're not aware of the autonomic nervous system, which consists of the sympathetic nervous system, or your flight, fight, freeze, or your stress response, and then you have your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest, digest, and the relaxation. Throughout the day, you want to try and maintain an active parasympathetic nervous system, decreasing the amount of stress hormones being released. You can do this through constantly conducting mindfulness, meditation, yoga, doing diaphragmatic breathing, the type of breathing technique where you feel your stomach expanding rather than your chest. A good technique is called the 4-7-8, where you take 4 seconds to fill your lungs, you hold your breath for 7 and let it out for 8 seconds. This is a good stress management technique that will help with sleep. The next one is adjust your bedroom. So really your bedroom should only be for sleeping and sex. This is so when you enter the room, the mind is trained to realize that it's time to go to bed. So if you have TVs or other activities that are constantly being conducted in your room, you need to rearrange that if possible to where the only activities in your room are limited to just sleep. And also you want to light-proof your room. When it's dark, have the lights off and do a check to see, is there too much light entering your room? Are there electrical devices like surge protectors with lights shining? You may need to put a piece of tape over those. If you cannot eliminate all light, then what you'll want to do is use a eye mask to shield your eyes from the light. Now, self-care technology. It's key once you learn to, now that you understand the stages of sleep and how long each stage lasts, and to track how well your sleep hygiene is, it's good to use some of the different sleep trackers that they have. They have different wearables, and then they have different mobile apps. A lot of the wearables, they'll track your blood oxygen levels to see if you're having obstructive sleep apnea issues. It checks your heart rate. They have these accelerometers that checks your movement to determine which stages you're in. Now, the list of wearables that I have listed here came from a study that demonstrated which of the wearables out on the market have been demonstrating most effective in tracking sleep. You have the Oura Ring Gen 3, the Whoop 4.0, the WellU O2 Ring is a good one, the Dream, the Muse S, and the Fitbit Versa. Some of the mobile apps that I recommend, and I recommend everyone download the CBTI Coach, which you can find on the Veteran Affairs website. If you just Google that, you'll find it. Sleep Cycle is a good one, Sleep Plus Plus, Prime Nap, Snore Lab, and Brain HQ. You'll notice the screenshot in the bottom right. That's a screenshot actually from the app of the Oura Ring Gen 3. You see, you can compare this to that sleep histogram I showed you on the other slide just to see if you are getting enough sleep in each sleep stage and compare it to the amount of percentage. Because remember, deep sleep, you want to spend about 20% in deep sleep, about 25% in REM, and light sleep should be over 50% of your sleep. Final slide I want to talk about, one that most people seem to have the most issues with, is tips to fight insomnia, trying to fall asleep and stay asleep when you wake up. So the reason we have insomnia, it occurs from portions of the brain that activate the brain's alert center, areas that should be dormant with the onset of sleep. There's several evidence-based techniques such as emotional regulation, cognitive therapy, relaxation. They've been proven to put this alert area back to bed. So some of the tips is, first, do not worry about future sleep deprivation. When you worry about sleep deprivation, that activates the sympathetic nervous system and releases cortisol and makes it hard to fall asleep. You need to increase a sense of well-being. You need to make the brain feel safe. Focus on positive past experiences and future events you look forward to. This all puts the mind at ease and turns off the release of cortisol. Practice meditation and deep breathing. You can listen to a sleep meditation podcast or YouTube channel. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you're having trouble falling back to sleep, get out of bed, leave the lights off. You can take a small sip of water, sit calmly in another room, and then go back to the bed and fall back to sleep. Remember, calm the busy mind. Keep the mind feeling safe. A lot of times you may wake up and think about important things you have to do the next day. I like to have a pen and paper next to my bed, so if I wake up, I can scribble down that important thought and forget about it and fall back to sleep. Continuing to worry about it's going to deter your sleep. And like I said, go and download the Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Insomnia Coach mobile application and there's a technique on there called progressive muscle relaxation. This technique works well, and it has you kind of flex different muscles and focus on the sensations, and it works good. But if you say, hey, you told me not to look at my phone, so when you're using a CBTI app for insomnia and you don't want to look at the light, make sure before you go to bed, turn the light resolution all the way down so it's not as bright. This finishes this presentation. Visit utah23.org for more information, and look for my book coming out titled Self-Health Andragogy. It comes out June 2022. You'll find a lot of information about sleep, mental health, emotional regulation, managing chronic pain, and nutrition. Here's a list of all the resources I used for this video. Click on the description of this video and you can see these resources listed there as well.